Well, for the first time in about 12 days or so, perhaps, folks. But good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome into the 24/7, 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks. This is the LA Sparks 365 Network. Right here, folks, as we come your way for the first time in a few weeks, folks. Reason being, again, if you've seen me on Twitter lately, folks, you know that I've been extremely busy with a lot of other things, including involving school, work, home play, and other things included, folks. But we do have time tonight for once to bring you some post-game coverage here, folks, following yet another LA Sparks defeat tonight as the Lynx come in tonight and win their second game in 9 days over the Sparks, 94-77, alongside Chris Mancy at the Anaheim Studios up in Anaheim, California. Cal McClure joining you, folks, here from Studio 171 in San Diego. Chris, good evening. I know we've had some time off, more so because we've done a lot over the past few months involving games and, of course, with my schedule being completely overbooked. How has the downtime sort of been lately for you?
Nothing much. I'm just hanging here. Just got done making another petition and just can't wait, even though I hate it, but gotta be bringing in a lot of money.
We will wait and see what happens, folks. But Chris, before we do get to the basketball talk, folks, I'm sure you guys probably saw the news all over ESPN, Fox Sports 1, and Twitter and Facebook yesterday, folks, of the reason why the Parker jersey's not up there tonight, folks, is because I am honoring a San Diego legend. Chris, I know you saw it too yesterday, folks, but for those of you that did not hear about it, folks, but longtime San Diego Padres outfielder, a man that had a heart of gold, a big heart as well. But Mr. Padre, Mr. San Diego Sports, Tony Gwynn, passed away yesterday at about 1 a.m. Pacific time yesterday from cancer that he was fighting against in his mouth from his many years, folks, of doing chewing tobacco and stuff. Chris, there really is and never will be another Padre player like Tony in regards to work ethic, in regards to, staying up, into the graveyard hours to watch film of his swing, to put in all the hard work, Chris, that Tony did for 20 years with the Padres. 8 batting titles, 3,181 career hits, 2 trips to the World Series. And Chris, notably, of course, Chris, it will be well known here by myself that Tony was a teammate of Candace Wiggins' dad, Alan, in the 1984 season. Chris, I think Tony's passing yesterday morning pretty much, Chris, not only sent shockwaves throughout San Diego and the Padres organization, man, but throughout baseball. I mean, really, Chris, it looked like to me, man, it really hurt the Padre fan base as it should. But, Chris, a lot of the Angel fans were also hurt because, more so, Chris, Angel fans will be Padre fans because they don't want to root for the Dodgers, of course, because of the long-standing rivalry between those two franchises. And, of course, Chris, baseball lost, a tremendous father figure and a tremendous ambassador to their sport. And, of course, Chris, the city of San Diego lost their #2 icon behind Junior Seau, Chris. Chris, when you heard the news of Tony's passing yesterday, your thoughts and reaction to Tony Gwynn's passing yesterday morning from cancer?
Just a very sad day. Losing an icon of Tony Gwynn, and can't really say this, but I once I heard the news, I broke down in tears.
Chris, and folks, we will get to the Sparks game in a few minutes here, folks. Again, Sparks tonight lose 94-77 to the Minnesota Lynx. But Chris, I mean, the timing of it was. Chris, the timing of me hearing it was not the best time because I literally had just come off the freeway at Beach Boulevard next to Knott's Berry Farm when my brother did text me the news that Tony Gwynn did pass, and I remember just flipping out, and I nearly broke down, Chris, like I did here on the network on May 19th, and I nearly threw my breakfast out the window because it was that, Chris, it hit me that hard, Chris, because. And, Chris, I also do want to mention here that Art Castro on Facebook did just comment on my photo of Tony Gwynn saying, "I'm still in shock." So we will, of course, folks, talk about this for a while here. And, Chris, this will be a talking point for a while down here in San Diego. I will be going to the Padre game tomorrow night. And it's really, Chris, going to be interesting to see what the Padres will do tomorrow night to honor Tony. They have canceled 2 World Cup viewing parties for Team USA and the other games today at Petco Park to keep the statue of Tony Gwynn open at the park so fans can go down there till 11:30 each night, pay their respects, Chris. And Chris, of course, with myself living down here, Chris, and Candace Williams, Chris, can also vouch for this too, having watched Alan, her dad, and Tony play together in 1984 and that magical season of '84 with the Padres going to the World Series, Chris, is there will never, Chris, be another baseball player or anybody that will work as hard, put in the extra time and effort and practice, and will do, Chris, so many good things in the community like Tony did, Chris. And above all, Chris, having met Tony so many times when I was younger, when I was older, I mean, it always put a smile on my face, Chris, to talk to the greatest Padres player in the history of this franchise. And I mean, you know, Chris, it got to the point, Chris, where Tony knew me so well, Chris, that he actually called me by my first name. He didn't say, "How you doing, buddy?" He actually said, "Hey, Cal, how you doing today? How you feeling today? You know, you doing good? How's school going?" You know, he actually, Chris, he was that father figure, not just, Chris, to myself when I would see him at San Jose State baseball games or practices when I would go practice with the San Jose State baseball team, Chris, but he was that way toward his players, towards random people he would see at the grocery store. I mean, he was, you know, Chris, he went well out of his way to make you feel like you were part of his family. And, Chris, someone, again, Art Castro, again, to share my photo, Chris, saying Tony Gwynn, R.I.P., Chris. So, Chris, it was a tough day yesterday, Chris, not just for the Padres, Chris, I mean, knowing of Tony's passing, but, Chris, throughout baseball, I mean, Chris, it was fantastic to see that all 30 clubs in some fashion paid tribute, Chris, to Tony Gwynn in some very, very small fashion. And, Chris, we know that the Padres and Mariners are somewhat of an interleague rivalry series dating back to '97, Chris, but the Mariners, a classy move. They did stencil the number 19 in Tony's favorite hitting spot, Chris, the 5.5 hole between the third baseman and shortstop. The Tigers yesterday, Chris, had a fitting tribute to as well. And, Chris, everybody held a moment of silence before their games yesterday. So, Chris, it's more than just a Padres player. Chris, it's more so of this being probably one of the greatest left-hand hitters in all of baseball history. And I'll say it before, Chris, I'll say it again, but Chris, will never, ever, in any time, from this point forward, Chris, be a better hitter or a better player, Chris, or the Padres or anybody than Tony Gwynn, Chris. And I can only imagine, Chris, what his son, Tony Jr., is going through, Chris, who, Chris, bears his dad's number. He wears number 19 with the Phillies. He's been put on the bereavement list, Chris, to be with his family. Just you can only imagine, though, I mean, how Tony's son feels right now, knowing that his dad, his partner, his best friend and mentor, Chris, is no longer with him.
Yeah, probably just very emotional right now that his dad is not with them, and yeah.
Again, folks, we do kind of apologize for kind of going off base here. We will get to the Sparks game momentarily, but again, Chris, Chris, we know that we're for the Sparks in the WNBA, Chris, but knowing though that there's someone in our community, either in San Diego, Orange County, or in Los Angeles, Chris, when there's a figure like Junior Seau, like Nick Edenhart, you know, like Bill Sharman with the Lakers, or, you know, with Tony with the Padres, Chris, when these icons that we've looked up to for many years, like Tony and Junior and Nick and Bill, you know, and other people, Chris, involved with SoCal sports, it really puts a damper on your day, you know, and especially, Chris, looking at the Kings who just won the Stanley Cup. You know, I think back to Ace Bailey, you know, and their 2 scouts, Chris, that were killed on 9/11 in the Twin Tower attacks. And of course, David Courtney, Chris, the longtime voice of the Angels and the Kings and the Clippers. You know, when the Kings won the Cup in 2012, he was there to see it. Chris, when the Angels won in 2002, he was there to see it. He wasn't there to see the Kings win it this year in 2014. I'm sure, Chris, he would have been proud to see the Clippers get out of the first round for once in their franchise history. But, Chris, when it's people that we know well, whether we know them personally, like I knew Tony very well, or we're just big fans of a team, when something like this happens, Chris, you got to talk about it because you're going to hear about it in your local newspaper and your local television for the next week or so, Chris. So it is what it is, Chris. We're going to get to the game here, folks, momentarily. But again, Chris, we got to kind of pause and do our due diligence here, Chris, and pay tribute to a sporting legend, not just in San Diego, Chris, but across the entire country. I mean, everybody, Chris, whether they were a Padre fan or not, which I know there's maybe one true fan, that might be myself, Chris, watching this network right now, or on this network, Chris. But when it's someone that you know very well in some fashion, because you know, Chris, that Tony had a legacy here, whether you watch the team or not, but there was a legacy here. 20 years with one team, Chris, no championships. Sounds like someone we're going to talk about here momentarily, Chris, so far in the WNBA. But Chris, 20 years with one team, so many milestones, Chris, and accomplishments over his career that it's just depressing, Chris, that this was the scene yesterday, that an entire city, Chris, once again gets kicked in the groin, and another one of their sporting legends is gone and no longer with us.
Yep, agree.
So we do have two viewers, Chris, so I think we better get on our game here and get back to the important deal, folks, of the Sparks game tonight in downtown Los Angeles, Chris. I saw the Sparks lose once again in another terrible effort by the team. The Lynx come in, Chris, for the second time in 2 weeks and 9 days and smash the Sparks and sizzle them to a crisp. 94-77. It is all about 31 points later, Chris. Complete pandemonium, Chris, is going on with this Sparks team right now. And, Chris, we're going to get to a lot of it here on the network. Chris, where do we start with this game tonight? We'll let you get the ball rolling, Chris, because I know that you caught most of the game. I only cut the last part of the second half, Chris, but we'll let you start, okay? I don't know, I guess, kind of like your takeaway, I guess, from this game tonight.
Just the Sparks didn't look like they had it in the beginning. Just started off terrible, just like they did last game against Minnesota when Minnesota went on that 11-2 run, and right when the beginning, Sparks didn't have it. They got back right when the second half almost ended. The first half ended. They got into it, but right when the second half started, Minnesota just took over and ran away with it.
Chris, so much for us saying that Tulsa and the Stars will be punching bags this weekend. That's role reversal, Chris. Now the Sparks, in a span, Chris, of maybe 4 games, now they've become the punching bag of the Western Conference. And I never thought, Chris, I would ever say that the Sparks could be the ones getting the crap kicked out of them in 2 games. Okay, Chris. The Tulsa game, Chris, came down to the wire. Okay, it came down to Chris, that was probably, if I had to rank the best game so far, Chris, out of the losses so far, being the best games, Chris, surprisingly here, but the triple overtime game, Chris, is one. That Tulsa game, Chris, is pretty damn close. Now, we know, Chris, the Sparks should have won that game, but, Chris, they got beat at the buzzer in that game, so that one can slide. But giving up 101, though, to the Stars last Saturday, and then you come out here tonight, Chris, and like I tweeted out, man, it just seems like, Chris, the Sparks just love getting behind by a big deficit, Chris, early and often. I don't know what the deal has been, Chris, because we've been away for so long on the network because we've had time off because of my schoolwork and stuff like that, and we kind of apologize, Chris, and to everyone out there for not doing so. But when you're juggling a bunch of schedules, folks, we're doing our best here. But Chris, there's been a lot of consternation, Chris. There's been a lot of volleys being thrown back and forth, Chris, by the fam on Twitter. We'll get to that later on in the show. But, Chris, I don't know where I start here. Other than whatever I've tweeted, Chris, is the damn truth. When is someone else on this team going to get their Chris, when is someone else on this team going to get their head out of their ass and step up and help Candace Parker out? This is complete nonsense that it's the same player playing every night. That's just, Chris, it's what has been the bowling point for me. It's because it's always, Chris, it just seems like it is always Parker versus Minnesota or versus Chris, that opposition, because no one decides to help her out, Chris, and it's always her versus someone else, Chris. Or normally it's 5-on-2. And tonight, Chris, it was Parker and Beard versus Minnesota. I mean, am I not right on here? Is that 100% accurate about this right now?
Yep, it's pretty much accurate. Pretty much Parker and someone on the Sparks helping out, just like you said, 5-on-2, and that's it. Need everyone to step up, help out Parker, help out the whole team, and get the victory.
Chris, until someone else, okay, other than Elena tonight, until somebody else leads the Sparks in points, except for tonight, we're not going to win. I mean, it's pretty plain simple, Chris, that it is basically the Los Angeles Parkers and a tag team partner versus a full team on the opposing side, Chris. And that's been the trend during this losing skid. It's mainly, Chris, Ben Parker and sometimes a tag team partner against that opposition, Chris. So when is somebody else, not named Candace Nicole Parker, not wearing number 3 with braids, going to pick their game up, Chris, and help out the MVP for once in their lives?
I know. They need to step up now. The next game, when we face the Tulsa Shock, need to step up, need to turn it around like I said today, which it didn't happen. But the next game, we need to turn it around right away. Everyone better step up, help out Candace Parker, get this team a win, because if you lose the next game, like someone said, we'll probably be, like someone said on Twitter, Lex will probably be a lottery pick.
That, Chris, will be fighting for our lives in the 4C with the playoff berth. But, Chris, I do have to, though, Chris, there is one bright spot out of tonight's game, Chris, and that is the fan attendance tonight, Chris. Knowing, Chris, what they've seen is they've seen the Sparks, Chris, go a whole another direction. Just like this is like 2011 all over again, man. But, Chris, applause to the great Sparks fan base out there, Chris. Reason being, Chris, tonight's attendance was 9,636 on a Tuesday night, and when the team, Chris, is not playing their best. So, Chris, win or lose, the fans will show up to see their beloved team play.
Yep, agreed. Just like the brothers, the Lakers, even though we saw this season worst season in franchise history, but they still showed up and sold out Staples Center. They just also, well, they didn't sold out Staples Center for the NBA game for the Sparks, but they showed up even though we're terrible right now.
Chris, that is, those are true fans, okay? Sparks fans, Chris, and WNBA fans, and Chris, the Sparks fan base and the entire league fan base are nowhere close to bandwagon Heat fans, Chris, okay? Chris, we know that we're not leaving the game, regardless of how bad our team is losing or how much we're up by, Chris. So at least, Chris, we can say that we're a better fan base than the Miami Heat, because they leave games when it's 10 minutes to play in the game and they're losing by 10. Okay, it's typical bandwagon dumbass NBA fans going on over there. But Chris, going back to the matter at hand, Chris, is just how pathetic right now, Chris, these Sparks are playing. And Chris, I mean, it's kind of a strong word, Chris. There's other words that I would say, Chris, that are expletive content that I probably will say when I go to sleep tonight, but I can't see them on here because of the family content here. But that, Chris, is literally, I mean, okay, I could say that it's pathetic, it's crappy, it's ridiculous, it's sickening, it's depressing, it's unsparks-like, it's mediocre. What else can I say? It's unprofessional, knowing what's going on in the front office right now. There's no loyalty with this franchise right now. Number 20 on the team right now. What else can I say right now? I think I pretty much said it all, Chris. What about yourself? I don't know.
I don't know. You said pretty much everything.
And I think I basically, Chris, hit all the nails on the head pretty much, and it's pretty much set in stone, because Chris, that is what has been the story of the season. Chris, this has been the story of the year since June 1st, since that triple overtime game. Is it has not been the same LA Sparks team. I mean, it just has not been. Just like I tweeted out, these are not the same Sparks that we fans and media people know and love the best, Chris, because this team right now, Chris, has no identity, no depth, no image, and they've turned into being the punching bag and laughing stock of the WNBA, Chris, in a matter of 10 games. I just, it's shocking to me that this has happened so far in this season.
Yep, agreed. Just pathetic that once we know what we've gone through this offseason, and they're just probably still don't believe, they're probably still shocked, they're still staying in Los Angeles, but they need to turn it around right away because there's only 34 games in the season. They need to hurry up, turn it around. There's still a lot of games, but they need to turn it around right now.
Chris, I'm going to say it. This team does not want to play right now. They just, Chris, come to the, in my view, they come to the arena, Chris, with a mindset that they're going to lose for some reason. It just seems that way right now, that they have this mindset that they're not going to win for some reason. Okay, I don't know why. Okay, maybe, Chris, I can see that against Minnesota. But come on, against Washington, against Tulsa, San Antonio. Come on now, guys. You really got to get this thing fixed. Like, pronto, ASAP, and fixed tomorrow. Don't wait till Thursday, Chris. You get ready tomorrow. You go to LA Southwest College, Chris, and you maybe have an altercation with a student like CP apparently did, courtesy of TMZ.com, and stuff like that. We're not going to get to that, Chris, because it's a legal matter, and it's probably Chris Paul's report, knowing what you tweeted and texted me about LeBron James going to the Lakers today. But, Chris, you start tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow's a new day, Chris. You start your mindset for Thursday. That better freaking start tomorrow. Don't wait till the fourth quarter when you're losing by 20. It better start tomorrow morning when you roll off the rack. Okay, your mindset for Thursday better start when your alarm clock goes off and you get breakfast tomorrow morning and read Elliot and read the Times or read through my Twitter feed or Chris' Twitter feed to really see how bad you guys are playing right now, Chris. All that better start tomorrow morning when they roll off the rack tomorrow to get back in line here and get back on track.
Yep, agree. They better, like they did before, probably go on an 18-game win streak to get things rolling again. They need to go. And Thursday, you need to kick, Tulsa Shock, rolling them, and beat them really good and get things rolling.
And, folks, the Sparks defeated tonight again, 94-77, the Sparks with the loss. And this is no joke, folks. The Sparks with the loss have faltered to 3-7, and they are in the bottom pits. They are in 6th place in the Western Conference. Now, Chris, going to what you said about the offseason, it's still probably fresh in their mind knowing that they could have either been folded or demised, Chris. Folded, demised in the Bay Area. But spare me that, man. 10 games in the year, they can't be thinking about the offseason, Chris. 10 games in, you've got to be ready to roll, Chris, and this team is not. Now, I don't know what the deal is, Chris. Sure, it is about what we're going to talk about next, Chris, about Tolliver being gone and this and that in our right now failed petition efforts, Chris, to get rid of Ross and Toller as from their jobs right now on change.org, Chris. But right now, man, there's really almost like there's no words to say right now other than, you know, come down to my house and watch the DVR, and you can see how bad this team is playing, Chris, because that is how bad this season has gone so far for the Sparks. Is to the point, Chris, because I record every game on my DVR when they're playing on television. It's coming to that point in time, Chris, where any time now, Chris, if they lose, I erase the game off my DVR because I don't want to go back, Chris, and rewatch a game where they lose. I mean, and above all, Chris, a game like tonight where they got whitewashed and got taken to the woodshed by the Lynx.
Yep, agreed. It just seems right when that win, if you've seen the trend, right when the Sparks washed the floors in Chicago, where it should have not happened, and both the teams went downhill after that.
Well, Chris, at least we know there's two teams out there that are in the same boat as the Sparks. That'd be Chicago and New York. But we know that New York's not doing it anytime soon, unfortunately, for the Liberty and their fans out there. One of my other favorite WNBA teams out there, folks, is the Liberty. Why, I don't know. I don't even ask. Chris, I don't know, man, because there's just, like, really nothing left to say, man, except that this was a pathetic game tonight at Staples Center, Chris. But we are going to move on, though, Chris, to the boiling point here, Chris, for every fan. Is just what has occurred still with this entire Tolliver saga, Chris. And why the hell have the Sparks, Chris, still have not signed Megan Simmons? There's another thing I'm going to get to, Chris, because that, Chris, has been the head scratcher, the hair puller, the whole 9 yards, Chris, through this season right now. Because, Chris, if you folks recall back a few weeks ago, I believe on that June 1st or June 2nd broadcast here on the network, where Chris and I both said that it wouldn't surprise us if the Sparks lost every game until Tolliver came back from Slovakia. Well, Chris, I think we are on the right track for all the wrong reasons with that, Chris, but I think we're right, though. I mean, I'm standing by our guns. I'm standing by our Ace 3 guns, Chris, that it's going to happen. The Sparks will lose on Thursday. They'll probably lose on Sunday. Thank God we're not going on Sunday, by the way, Chris, so we know about that, too. And also, I mean, they'll probably lose, Chris, the day before Tolliver comes back to the States, Chris. So that is just, yeah, Chris, it's at that point, man, where I'm going to go back and reshare that photo I shared a few nights ago about the Sparks, where it's Picard from Star Trek, Chris, doing this. Because this is what the Sparks fan base should be doing right now. This is, Chris, just how bad it has gotten so far through 10 games. It's a face palm. You know, it's a head scratcher. It's a hair puller. You know, it's hand to the forehead. It's Tanisha going. It's Tanisha on Twitter, Chris, going to the nearest Briggs to jump off it. You know, it's Chris. At this point in time, I don't know what the deal is. Okay, so let's go on to the first topic, Chris, involving today's signee. Okay, 4 games. And Sam Prohalis, Chris, gets cut for Draxa Morris, Chris, who, if I remember correctly, Chris, I believe she was, she was waived during the training camp season. Chris, why bother doing this? I mean, okay, if you're not going to, Chris, give her a shot during the regular season or during camp, why bother doing it right now during the season right now?
I don't know. Just pathetic. You should have signed Megan Simmons that every Sparks fan wants right now.
Chris, I mean, if you're not going to give this player a shot during training camp, Chris, you're going to waive her. Why bother doing it during the regular season, Chris, at this point in time? Chris, I think it's pretty evident that you can pretty much, Chris, read it with Braille. The fan base wants Megan Simmons. As much, Chris, as we have tweeted the hashtag, the Sparks have been tweeted, and I'm sure by every fan. I'm sure Magic's probably got it, Chris. If you cannot grasp what the fan base wants, a la getting Simmons to LA, Chris, you got a problem. Chris, you know, this, Chris, is a reason why I have not been able to talk about the Sparks in a while, because I just don't know what to say. I said that, Chris, probably 10 times already here on the show that I don't know what to say. But just with these moves, Chris, these moves, okay, you're bringing for Hollis for 4 games. Okay, you don't need her. Okay, scrub off at LA Live looking for a job. You know, and that's, Chris, it's basically what it is. That is basically finding random, complete, no value-added players, Chris, that are either hanging out at the ESPN zone and that are at ESPN zone and at LA Live. They're on Chick Turn 4 looking at Magic Johnson's statue. It's like you're just, you know, you're just basically, you know, picking up random players that no one knows about. When you have someone at home training and getting back in shape, Chris, that you can easily sign to a contract right here and now if you wanted to, perhaps. So why is the front office not doing what the fan base is recommending, and that is signing Megan Simmons' contract?
Yep, agree. And also, even Megan Simmons also replied to, I think it was that one person on Instagram, and saying she's still working out. And she said, someone replied to her, we want to see you in LA. She said, I think still working out. So even Megan Simmons wants to be in LA.
So I don't know, Chris. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, you know, I know we've got a few more shows to go, Chris. We're gonna take a break here in a few minutes, but Chris, I think my parents are a little upset that I'm actually this loud right now, Chris, because I just got a text to go to see my folks in their bedroom in a few minutes here, and I will do that in a second, Chris. But Chris, what is when Chris, when you're a fan of a team and you see this play, Chris, that you are not used to, like the Sparks have been playing when you're used to seeing them winning and stuff, Chris, you're going to get fired up, and you're going to be loud and upset, Chris, like I have been, because this is not LA Sparks basketball. You know, we're probably watching, LA Southwest College basketball, Chris, all that I probably know, and you will get fired up, Chris. You will be pissed off. You will be upset. But Chris, a quick memo here Chris, and a bit of a little vent here for myself to the front office. Read the tweets from the fans. Look at the petition that we just started today. Do your damn job and do two things. Sign Megan Simmons, or you better fire Ross and Toller and bring in some fresh blood, because this crap is right now unfreaking acceptable by not just myself and Chris in the network here, folks, but the entire Sparks fan base cannot tolerate this mediocre, unprofessional basketball being played right now. Now, Chris, it's a pretty deep shot to the team, Chris, but that is what it's going to have to take, Chris, is we're going to have to do something like this. So, Chris, basically get the point across here. Either sign Simmons or do something else. Let somebody go mid-season. Chris, there's already reports in here that there is talk right now from Albert Lee on Switchfield.com, Chris, that he believes solely that Toller and Ross will be terminated, Chris, during the season. So, Chris, that there is some ticking time bombs here, Chris, of why wasn't the trigger pulled a while back. Now, Chris, should the Sparks sign Simmons today or tomorrow and we start winning, you know what everyone's going to be saying, Chris?
Yep, everyone's saying, why didn't you do it in the beginning? But he said there was viewers. I also tweeted to Coach Miller. He might be watching, so.
Chris, I wouldn't know, nor do I want to know, because Chris, for all that I know, he might still be on Sportsnet right now, so I'm pretty sure he's. And Chris, getting to Dave real quick, we know that there was a upside and a downside with Dave and yourself on Twitter a few days ago, but Chris, Chris, even listening to Coach Miller tonight on the broadcast of the postgame show, Chris, he was very disappointed, Chris, with how the Sparks have played. His opening statement, Chris, he was very, he wasn't, Dave Miller selfish. He was actually very serious, just and a bit depressed and a little worried, I think, about the team, because even Chris, he knows he knows how well this team can play, and Chris, I don't know. And frankly, man, we kind of talked about this too during the game time, Chris, but you perhaps think, barring Ross getting fired during the season, do you think, Chris, that Coach Miller could probably step in and fill the void, perhaps, maybe as an interim coach, perhaps?
Probably, yeah. Or maybe a regular coach, maybe. Perhaps.
Chris, we'll probably get Chris. We'll probably get to the coaching scenarios, Chris, tomorrow night on the network back here at 9 o'clock tomorrow, because we do, Chris, have to go to Sparks Fam here in about 10 minutes or so here, but. At this point in time, Chris, again, folks, Sparks losing in the night 94-77. Just another terrible night at the office, Chris, for the Sparks. But, Chris, it's been pretty much, Chris, cemented in my mind for the past few days, and I just saw it on Twitter today, too, and it sort of, again, kind of made me think twice here about this, Chris, but Chris, knowing Candace Parker, okay, my favorite WNBA player, my best friend basically on Twitter and Instagram, and everyone else included, everything else included with her, Chris. Chris, knowing that the Sparks are this bad right now, it sort of has been in my mind the past few days, and I have weighed options, Chris. But, and it kind of actually, Chris, kind of actually makes me a little sad to actually talk about this, Chris, but Chris, knowing that Candace, Chris, has been in the league for 7 years, and she hasn't won a championship yet, Chris, do you at all believe perhaps, because I think her contract, Chris, runs out in 2 seasons, I think, in 2016. But do you at all, Chris, believe that perhaps, in the smallest thought of your mind, believe that perhaps that Candace Parker, who was supposed to be, Chris, the future of the Sparks franchise after LL9, Chris, retired, do you, Chris, at all believe in a small fashion that just maybe Candace Parker would leave the Sparks, play somewhere else, Chris, to win her long-lost championship ring? What do you think?
I think Candace Parker won't leave the Sparks. I think she'll stay with the Sparks and retire with the Sparks, and she'll probably win a ring, or yeah.
Chris, as much as you probably think the obvious answer, Chris, would be yes for me, I can't say that because I'm actually torn on this issue, Chris. I know wholeheartedly, Chris, that Candace wants to stay in Los Angeles. She's living out here now. She moved away from home in Chicago, Chris, and this has become her home to her, Chris. I mean, that's the good side of me is, oh, come on, man. Like, Candace is really going to leave Los Angeles. That's really going to happen, Chris. But at the same time, though, man, I can actually see the light at the end of that tunnel, though, Chris. The bad side of me. Like my guardian angel and my devil are like, both ways of me. You're like, yeah, she's going to stay. But, Chris, I can see the devil side of me, though, that, Chris, as much Chris, as it would pain me to not see this number on this LA jersey, Chris, I could fully respect her decision, Chris, if she ever did leave the Sparks to win her championship. Now, the reason why, Chris, I say I respect it is because, and I will say it here, Chris, to kind of be a little self-promotion here, Chris, but what she's done with me, Twitter, Instagram, high five at halftime on my birthday, Chris, she's sort of become my best friend almost. I will say that wholeheartedly here, Chris. And I, Chris, could fully respect her decision, Chris, if she ever did leave. Now, Chris, if she did leave, I do, Chris, have my possible sights of where Candace would possibly consider, Chris, going to play if she ever did leave the Sparks, Chris. Chris, as much as it pains me, as it stabs me in the back, it shoots me in the brain and the head, and it throws water in my face from a second-story balcony at someone's house. Chris, I could see Candace playing for Phoenix, Seattle, Minnesota, and she'll go home to play in Chicago. Now, the reasons why, Chris, I say those 4 teams. Phoenix being one, Chris, because we know how close her and Diana Taurasi are off the court. They're best friends, Chris. Of course, playing overseas in Russia. They're very close, and it's always a comedy show whenever you're around Candace and Diana anytime and place. And of course, Chris, there's pieces there as well with the Mercury, Chris. And Chris, frankly, I don't know how much longer Diana can actually play. 10 years in the league's long enough, Chris. 2 titles already for her. And their future, Chris, is Brittany Griner. And Chris, as much as it would pain everybody, Chris, not just myself, Chris, as being Candace's #1 male fan, I guess, it would pain you and pain the entire fan base, well, Chris, to see Candace, Chris, wearing that damn blue and orange. As much as it would kill all of us to see it, Chris, I could actually see that being reality. Now, I say Seattle, Chris, for another reason, too, being her connection, Chris, with Sue Bird in Russia as well. So that'd be another reason why, Chris, I say Seattle. And, of course, Chris, Minnesota being the third option because we know what they've done. 2 titles in 3 years, Chris. Big 3, Chris, can it be, Chris, a big 3 could possibly become a fatal 4-way between Moore, Augustus, Whalen, and CP, Chris. Holy crap if that happens. And of course, Chris, Chicago. For one damn reason. It would be, Chris, her damn homecoming. She's from Chicago. She's a big Bulls fan. She's got all of her family, Chris, back in Chicago. And, Chris, I will respect any of those decisions, Chris, but I will love it even more if the hometown girl, Naperville, Illinois' favorite daughter, Chris, if she came back home to play in Chi-Town. Now, Chris, I can respect Phoenix and Seattle and Minnesota and those 4 teams, Chris, I listed because, I will follow her wherever I might go. But half and half, man. My angel says she's staying. My devil side, though, says Mercury, Storm, Rain, Sky. Because you know me very well. But I will respect her decision, wherever she might wind up in the future.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you're going to say she's not going anywhere, Chris, but if DP did leave, I know she's not your player, Chris, and you don't really follow her that much because she's my player. Where do you think she would go, though, barring if she did walk away from the Sparks and go play elsewhere in the league?
I think if she does leave, I think she'll go with Chicago in her return homecoming. And if she does go back to Chicago, I think right when she returns, I think they'll win the championship right when she returns.
Chris, it very easily could happen with the Sky. I mean, we know that they've been Chris, we know that the Sparks and Sky are in the same boat since that June 6th game, Chris. Reason being, man, because Elena Del Don has actually, Chris, had a relapse of her Lyme's disease, Chris, so she hasn't played in the past few games. But, Chris, I mean, someone asked me that question. It was actually Shorty, Chris, in the off-air hangout. He asked if Candace did leave, would you respect her decision? Would you still be one of her biggest fans, and would you respect it? Chris, you know what I'm going to say. So, of course I'm going to respect it because, like I said too, man, I mean, everything, Chris, that she's done, Twitter and Instagram, and, giving me the high five at halftime, Chris. I mean, I will say it again. She sort of, Chris, has become two things. One of my best friends on social media, and sort of that sister I never had in my life almost. I mean, because, like we say a lot, man, there's really no players, Chris, in pro sports that would take time to say hi to their fans. And, Chris, I mean, come on now. I mean, she's replied to me. She's followed me. Chris, for God's sake, she freaking said happy birthday to me on May 18th, Chris. So she's sort of that sister figure, Chris, that I never had. And the high five was one thing, Chris, but if July 17th could kind of hurry up and get here a bit faster, that'd be a lot better because I'm going to that game with my cousins and family that day, it sounds like. So that happens. If it can come here sooner, like we're a month away right now, so if I can ask for to July 17th, that'd be awesome. We'll see what occurs out of that, Chris. So, folks, we'll take our time out here when we come back finally. We'll have a full edition, folks, of Sparks fans with the event, folks, about this game. Send us your tweets, your IG photos, your emails, and let all the pushing know you folks. Sparks fam up next right here on the LA Sparks 3. But, folks, please do not go away.